Today we're going to talk a little bit about confidentiality. The rules associated with confidentiality can be a little sticky, and it's very much front and center in society today, the need to protect a person's private information, especially when it comes to healthcare and other issues. Confidentiality is key and critical. So basically, all of those who are privy to client information are bound by rules of confidentiality. They must keep the client's information confidential or private. They are bound by those rules. However, there are exceptions, and today we're going to go over some of the exceptions to the rules of confidentiality. So instead of describing the rules of confidentiality, we're instead going to talk about the exceptions to that and some of the limitations on those exceptions to rules of confidentiality. So number one, when we think about exceptions to the rules of confidentiality, are subpoenas. If a court subpoenas information, they are allowed and must receive the information subpoenaed. However, the limitation is only the information explicitly required by the subpoena. Just because a subpoena shows up does not mean that you then upend the dump truck and say, here's everything. The subpoena will be very specific. We are looking for this information. The information explicitly requested must be supplied. So you find out what's required and you give that and only that. So it's a limited exception to the rules of confidentiality. Two, for treatment continuity, certain information will need to be passed on. So for instance, a health care provider is providing care in a given context, and for whatever reason, due to vacation, medical leave or maternity leave, an illness, whatever it might be, they are then removed from the care of that patient or person. Because they leave doesn't mean that the person's care must stop. So someone else is brought in to pick up the slack, and that person who's brought in to continue the treatment must be brought up to speed on the information about that person and that case. So to provide continuity of care, rules of confidentiality don't have to be kept. The person now providing the care has got to be given that information. So for treatment continuity, because one person is left for vacation, leave, or illness, does not mean that the patient's care ends. Three, insurance coverage. Insurance companies, in order to cover things, they require certain information be supplied to them for liability purposes. Once again, the limitation is those things and only those things necessary for them to determine liability. They're not allowed to know everything, and just because they've made a request doesn't mean, once again, you upend the dump truck. Remember, the whole thing of confidentiality and the rules of confidentiality is to protect the patient. But with these exceptions, certain information can, should, and must be shared. So when an insurance company says, look, we know you're providing treatment for this patient, we're providing the money, the insurance for it, we need to know for liability purposes this, this, and this. And if those things are legitimate, then that information needs to be supplied. It is an exception to the rules of confidentiality. Number four, the client themselves may request certain information be supplied to certain parties. When this is the case, and obviously if the person says, this is my information, I control it, and I'm not worried about confidentiality in cases of the following things, then you're not bound by the rules of confidentiality. As a matter of fact, what you're bound by is the client telling you, I want you to supply this information to this party. I want them to know. Please don't keep it from them. So in that case, the best course of action is to get it in written form. Would you, if possible, would you write out for me those that you want the information freely shared with, or whom the rules of confidentiality don't apply to? So in this case, it may be a clergy person, family members, other things like this. If the patient or client explicitly says the rules of confidentiality don't apply here and I want you to supply the information, if you can get it in written form, do so, and then comply. Then five, mandated reporting. Mandated reporting. There are some things that, according to the law, and once again, insurance purposes and subpoenas, the reporting of abuse, things like this are required. You can't go and say, well, rules of confidentiality, I know I'm supposed to report evidence of abuse, but I can't, rules of confidentiality. No, it's mandated reporting. You must report it. You must pass on the information in that case. And once again, to the insurance company and whatever information is subpoenaed by a court of law. So the exception would be for lawful mandated reporting. And then number six, for the child welfare. If the patient or client happens to be a child, in their case, their welfare is paramount. In order to preserve their welfare, you may have to make some exceptions to the rules of confidentiality. Once again, Talk about 5 with mandated reporting. If in the case of a child there is evidence of abuse, physical or sexual, some nature, that abuse must be reported. You can't leave it under the rules of confidentiality. If they are causing harm to themselves or to others, that also must be reported. And then if there are any legal violations, those must be reported. And a parent or guardian must be informed as well because they are in the care, the child is in the care of the parent or the guardian. So these are some of the exceptions to the rules of confidentiality. Remember, the basic thing is people have a right to confidentiality. They have a right to keep their information private. But there are exceptions to that right and to those rules. We've gone over 6 of those. If you want to learn more about this or related matters, underneath this video you'll see a link. If you'll click on that link, it'll take you to the website that has that information. And while you're on that website, you'll also find a link to an ebook that's ready for immediate download.